Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm still here in the Spey side, and behind me is the big river Spey. Yeah, because it's the Spey side. But today we're not talking just about the Spey, but the Strathspey Railway. It was an old railway that was discontinued in the 1960s, but some private guys made it happen and even continued a bit longer. At some point they actually took out all the rails and really demolished it. And what's left today is a pathway. It's a nice walkway between Cragganmore and Ballinalloch. And it's about 19 kilometers, and you can just walk along the Spey. So it's really a beautiful walk and just a scenic route through the Spey side. And what's important about this position here is that there's a small burn feeding the Spey, and it's the Cragganmore. Yeah, the Cragganmore leads a bit up the hill and supplies the Cragganmore Distillery. And that's what we're going to look at today. Let's talk about the history of the Cragganmore Distillery. The distillery was founded in 1869 by John Smith. And John Smith was really a special, extraordinary person. The first thing we know about John Smith, he was called Big John. Big John, why was he called Big John? Because he was a really, really large person. And for that time, he was extraordinarily large. It's said to be that he was 140 kilos heavy. And that meant that he was not allowed to ride in a normal train cart. He always had to ride in the guard's van. Yes, back in the days you had guards on trains. So yeah, it was a bit more of an adventure to drive or travel through the countryside. And he was a really, really big fan of railway. So he was also working in the whiskey business. He worked for Macallan, he worked for Glenfarclas, for Glenlivet. And so he was really a well-known specialist within the whiskey industry. And he combined these two trades, the railway and the whiskey business. So he knew the railway was built being up here or near the River Spey. And he knew there's good water around here. So he thought, let's build a new distillery at the foot of the hill of the Cragganmore Hill, which you see behind the distillery. And he knew there was good water here, good spring, so he built the distillery. And in 1887, the first train left the area with 74,000 liters of whiskey. So his dream came true. Unfortunately, he passed away 1 year before that. Really unlucky man, but his dream came true, and he passed on the distillery to his son, which his son rebuilt the distillery together with the famous architect Charles Doig, who designed a lot of distilleries, and he made the distillery what it is today. The distillery was sold a couple of times, and in the end it ended up with Diageo, and Diageo uses it as a single malt distillery as well as in their Johnnie Walker blended malt. Yeah, so let's have a look for how the production is. Behind me is the old Porter's mill, and this malt mill doesn't really mill like you know from a mill that produces flour, but it makes a coarse grist. So you have a two-stage roller mill with 4 rollers, and the malt man here adjusts the distance between the pins with this dial here, with these 2 dials of the first stage and the second stage. The first stage is responsible for just cracking open the malt, and the second stage is for how fine it should be ground down. So in the end, they want to have the perfect combination of flour, grits, and husks. And with this combination, it goes off to the mash tun. So 7 tons of these grists end up here in the mash tun. They're being mixed with the Cragganmore water that we saw at the beginning, and they're being filled in here with very hot water and being raked, and all the starch and the sugar are being diluted. The starch is actually broken down by enzymes, so even more starches are turned into sugar. So you end up with a really sugary substance called mash that is perfect for the fermentation. But usually the distilleries have batches of water that they're going to use. So first water, second water, third water. At Cragganmore, they're doing it continuously. So they fill in the water with the grist continuously, and then they, after a while, they start draining it. And while they drain it, they sprinkle on new hot water. So there's always hot water and mash inside the mash tun, and continuously fill up the wash bag. And when the wash bag is filled up enough, then they still gonna do mashing, because there's still some sugar and some starches left inside the mash tun. And what they do with the water then is they store it in a separate tank to use that water that is already a bit sugary in the next run. So everything is being conserved here at the mash tun at Cragganmore. The distillery has 6 beautiful wash bags made of Douglas fir. And yes, they are wooden wash bags. They look pretty new, but pretty new for a wash bag is 10 to 20 years. They're filled up continuously from the mash tun to up to 30,000 liters, and then the guys from the distillery add yeast and it starts to ferment. So everything is bubbling up and the sugar is converted into alcohol and CO2. The CO2 is being collected and being disposed. What remains is the alcohol inside the wash, kind of a beer without the hops. And that wash is the perfect substance for the distillation of whiskey. So I'm standing here in the stills room, and we have 4 beautiful copper stills. 2 wash stills, 2 spirit stills. The wash stills are filled with 9,200 liters, and the spirit stills are filled with 6,100 liters. What is unique about Cragganmore is they are a Speyside, but then don't have the stereotypical Speyside character. They're not round, sweet, smooth. They're a bit more spicy, edgy, rough. So what they do here in the distillation for that is they actually distill fast. So they boil pretty strong, pretty fast, and distill as fast as possible. And the other thing what they do is they have warm tubs. Warm tubs are a very traditional way of condensing your alcoholic vapors back into spirit. And what that actually is a big tub, and there are pipes going in circles around in there, and this cools the vacuum, the vapors of alcohol, and you get the spirit. And the last thing that we have here at the spirit still is you have a flat top. And there are 2 legends about why you have a flat top. First one is John Smith was a brilliant distiller, and he actually wanted a flat top to just get the right character for Cragganmore. And the other one is the roof was too low, they didn't fit it in, they had to cut it and put it on the side. So which one? Actually, the people at the distillery don't know. So there are 2 legends out there. Yeah, so what we end up here is a really rough, tough, spicy, raw spirit for the maturation. So I'm standing in one of these nice dunnage warehouses where the casks are stored 3 casks high, and it's pretty damp and chilly, just the atmosphere you want to have for a single malt Scotch whiskey to mature slowly and steadily. Yeah, So the distillery has 4 warehouses on site. But not all Cragganmore casks are stored at Cragganmore. They're being shipped out because Cragganmore is part of the Diageo company, and so they don't want to have all the risk of having all the casks in one place. If, for example, something really bad happened to Cragganmore, then they would still have some Cragganmore casks in some warehouses somewhere else. And by doing that, the Cragganmore distillery also has to accept other casks. So if you go around here, you find some other casks from other distilleries as well. So it's a bit of a safety issue. Yeah, let's talk about the maturation of Cragganmore. We had the spirit that is still a bit sulfury, and it's rich and spicy and a bit rough. To make that into a nice drinkable whiskey, it has to be matured. In case of Cragganmore, it's the 12-year-old expression, the flagship. We have a maturation 12 years in ex-bourbon casks. They're hogsheads with about 250 liters of volume. And what these casks have is a charcoal layer. So they're being burned out, and there's a layer of coal all around. And that coal reacts with the substances, with the flavor inside the whiskey. And the charcoal is active like a charcoal filter, and that takes out the unwanted flavors. So what you're ending up with in a Cragganmore whiskey is you do have richness, you do have spiciness, and the sharp substances are being taken out by the coal. So you end up with a really drinkable, even some people say smooth, rich, spicy whiskey, and that's what Cragganmore stands for. And then we have another expression, the Distiller's Edition, which is a normal 12-year-old Cragganmore, and then you finish it in port pipes. And here in the warehouse somewhere around, couldn't find many of them, are some port pipes that are being used for the Distiller's Edition. It gives the whiskey a bit of an extra flavor. There's a bit of more fruity touch to it, a bit more complexity in it. So yeah, it's just the Distiller's Edition. So this was it with the Cragganmore distillery. It's a really beautiful distillery, and if you ever come to the Speyside, I would highly recommend that you visit the distillery and have a look around for yourself and try the expressions. There are some expressions that are only available at the distillery, and the whiskey bottles they have there are really exceptional. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I think I'll have a glass of the 12-year-old. I think I'll earned it. And yeah, see you next time.